And now
welcome to Draft Utopia's 2019 NFL Draft tight end rankings. Joey was having a very articulate discussion about Mitch McConnell, but we're going to put that on hiatus thanks to the tight ends in this draft class. And we're going to start with the Fant man known as Noah Fant.
I'm so confused at the moment.
Guys,
14 minutes, people. The Hostmaster General wasn't here. So the other two people got into a political discussion.
Basically, Joey and Kerm were playing Face the Nation during my absence until I arrived.
I didn't even know if we were recording.
We were not recording that. It was off-air footage, but we're going from Joey and Kerm playing Face the Nation off the air and transitioning into the tight end rankings for this year's NFL draft.
Sure, we'll go with that.
And we'll start with the Fant man, known as Noah Fant, Iowa Hawkeyes tight end. This guy, he's the top tight end in the draft. His route running is amazing. He can run 30 different routes. He's got blocking. This guy can make spectacular catches, and he beat Denzel Ward in coverage last year. He doesn't really have any weakness outside of the occasional drops, but he's a pretty complete target, and I'm looking at 5 teams, maybe Denver, 41, Cincinnati, 42, Carolina, 47, Minnesota at 50, and Tennessee at 51. Those would be all ideal spots for Noah Fant. There's a chance he even gets pushed up into the late portion of the first round. I don't really see any threats, but he's got the upside to be the only Pro Bowl tight end in the class. And he picked apart Denzel Ward on tape last year in 2017. Even though his 2018 tape wasn't as lethal, he still has a lot going for him. And I really haven't seen anyone in college football this season emerge to challenge or even supplant Noah Fant out of Iowa. How do you feel about Noah Fant? Do you still think he's the top tight end in the draft, Joey?
I haven't watched him. I do not know. I defer to your expertise on this subject.
Well, he had a big game versus Ohio State last year in 2017. And it was the game where Iowa knocked Ohio State out of the playoff. And he had 2 touchdowns in that game.
Oh, I thought he was a receiver.
No, he's a tight end.
He's a tight end.
He's a draft-eligible tight end for Iowa, and Iowa has 2 of them in this class.
Okay, now that you mentioned the game using, so I did watch, I just got a few people on that game. I do recognize this. Overall, I liked his receiving more than I did anything. Wasn't he Iowa's leading receiver last year?
Yes, and I'm looking up the game log for this game just to help us. He had 4 receptions for 54 yards, but he had 2 receiving touchdowns, and both of them came against Denzel Ward, despite the fact that he was a tight end. He was able to line up as a receiver and still score touchdowns. And 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 10. He had 11 receiving touchdowns compared to 7 in 2018. He had 11 receiving touchdowns last year. And he was a bit of an under-the-radar player last season. Whereas this year, everyone knew who he was. Everyone was double-teaming him. Everyone was trying to limit what he did. And that's why his number had dropped in terms of production, because he can't really get away with as much, but he's still that skilled tape-wise, and it's pretty obvious he's the top tight end in the class. I think that he's the only tight end with a shot at making the Pro Bowl, but he's still that tight end. I mean, he has 19 receiving touchdowns in the last 2 seasons at Iowa, which is just otherworldly in my opinion.
Yeah, it's pretty good Okay, it's Iowa. It's great. I mean, Iowa's a running.
And he came in for George Kittle and had 19 touchdowns in the last 2 seasons. People forget George Kittle was his predecessor, and Kittle's done great things with the Niners.
Oh yeah, so I like him as a prospect. I mean, so I can. It's like so. I mean, if Iowa keeps it up, I mean, they may just end up being two tight ends. What Notre Dame is the linebacker. I mean,
they might become tight end university. They might supplant them. They might supplant the U and Notre Dame. It's tight end university.
Yeah, it's like what Ohio State is to defensive backs. You know, I can see worse calling cards for them.
Yeah, and they kept Urban Meyer from getting revenge on them because they didn't play Ohio State in 2018, despite beating them in 2017. And I gave a 90 grade to Noah Fant. And the next tight end, I gave an 86 grade to. And that's Elias Mack, the Notre Dame tight end, 6'5", 251. This is a guy we talked about a few years ago as a potential promising prospect back when Notre Dame had Deshaun Kaiser. Mack was a guy that was on our radar as a potential future superstar, but academic probation, injuries kept him from reaching his ceiling. And then this year he puts everything together, and he gets 36 receptions, 360 receiving yards, 3 receiving touchdowns, and he has very good athleticism. Speed, the jumping is there. Like, this guy can run up to 30 different routes, run every type of route, just like Noah Fant. The post routes, post stop, curls, curl stops, drag, snag, shoots and routes, corner routes, sluggos. Soft hands. He can leap into the air. He can make spectacular catches, one-handed catches. Elias Mack's route running's improved to the point where he can run any route. You'd like to see more consistency from him in terms of production. I have a 4th-round grade on this guy, but he could move up. He plays in the 2019 Senior Bowl, and he got suspended for the entire 2016 season. I gave him an 86 potential grade, but Elias Mack's one of these guys who could move up even higher than the 4th round. If he can put everything together in the Senior Bowl, put everything together in the Combine. Mark Suba believes he has 1st-round potential. And while I do think he has that, he'd have to dominate the Senior Bowl, the Combine, and the Pro Day without getting into trouble in order to – and that's assuming Noah Fant dominates too. Like, I think there's a chance that this tight ends in this class could get pushed up a few rounds, but it all depends on how the tight ends do in the Senior Bowl and the Combine as the draft process unfolds. Because while there's a lot of talent, there's a lot of boomer bust prospects in this class as well. But I think after Noah Fant, Elias Mack out of Notre Dame is probably the most complete tight end in the class in terms of upside. Because we've talked about Mack a few times in the podcast before. He's originally known as Elias Jones.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's like I didn't recognize the last name, and I was like trying to wrap my brain on it. This is a guy I think has a lot of potential to be a very solid. I don't see superstar in it, but as I've told you guys, I
have an 86 grade on him, so I think he could be a solid starter, but he's not, like you said.
Yeah, but yeah, it's like I haven't had a chance to watch this year's tape on these guys, tight ends, but as far as what I saw last year, I'm looking and I'm saying, okay, this guy has a chance to be a very solid professional player. And, I mean, he is, I think he has the upside of Fant? No. But do I think he has do I think he's a more stable pick as far as does he have a higher floor? Yeah, I believe he has a higher floor. So, in that regard, I think he has a chance to be a much more solid selection.
Yep, and now we're going to go to another player who I also have an 86 potential grade on out of Boston College University. Tight end 3 in this class is Tommy Sweeney. I mean, I just love Tommy Sweeney's tape. Even though he had a down year statistically, 32 receptions, 348 receiving yards, 3 receiving touchdowns, I love what Tommy Sweeney does on tape. And it would take an awful week in Mobile for this guy to drop out of my top 3. I think this is the best tight end in the class based on physical strength. His route running is amazing. Just like the other 2 tight ends, he's got soft hands. He can leap into the air, can make spectacular catches. He just has a lot of strong traits on tape. The weakness is he's slightly overweight, and you'd like to see him more explosive. His game speed on film looks very lackluster. And while I love his route running, his athleticism and game speed on tape, which is completely different compared to the 40 time, it just looks slow. It's not lethargic, but it looks very slow compared to your average tight end. So this is a guy that I think could be like Cooper Kupp in the sense that they dominate the Senior Bowl but struggle at the NFL Combine. And I have a 4th round grade on Tommy Sweeney. I think this is a good player who could be a solid starter like Elias Mack, but they need to be the right tight end coach. And I really think it's going to come down to what this guy does in Mobile that's going to dictate his stock. I mean, this is a guy that's been blocking for running back A.J. Dillon at Boston College, and he was on my radar heading into the preseason as a potential dark horse. And I still like his tape that much, to the point where I still have him as the 3rd best tight end in this draft. But there's a lot of other tight ends in this group, and if he slips up in Mobile and someone else steps up, he could move out of the top 3 just like that. But for now, I'm going to go with Tommy Sweeney at number 3. He played
Tommy Sweeney.
He played Iowa in the bowl game last year. He showed a lot of promise.
Yeah. Boston College?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, now, here's the thing with Sweeney. I don't know if any of you guys have ever read his profile. Because, as you know, I do this quite often. When looking at prospects, I'll look at their profile, see what, if I can find anything interesting about them. First thing that jumps out to me about him, not any of these other, things that you're looking at, it's that, what is he listed on the Boston College webpage? He's a fullback. Now that brings a lot of different possibilities because, his career receiving stats, they're nothing really stand out about, but he's a hell of an end zone target. He's got 10 career touchdowns on 1,200 yards, 99 receptions in 4 years.
And he's 6'5", 260. So he's slightly overweight, but he could be used as a fullback or a tight end. He's a flex player.
Yeah, and that's valuable in this day and age in the NFL. Now, the thing is, so he is listed as a fullback, but he hasn't he hasn't run the ball any. So what am I looking at with that? He catches, over the last 3 years, he's averaged for, I'd say, around 30 yards per catch, or 30 catches per year. And so catches the ball pretty well. You don't get listed as fullback if you can't block in college. So, he's a pretty good blocker. He is your prototypical H-back. Let's face it, he's the guy you're going to put over there to block occasionally, get cheap passes out of the backfield. He's going to be a situational player. Pretty good situational player, but at the same time, he's going to be one of those situational players. And, I'm not going to say anything bad about it, but at the same time, that you a little bit.
You're right. It does limit you to a point, but I'm trying to think of a really good situational player to compare him to, because I think comparing him to Gronkowski or Kels is completely unacceptable. Even Jason Witten's a stretch. But to compare him to someone like Jesse James or someone like Dennis Pitta or maybe Tyler Kroft, who could come in and be an effective starting tight end, that's a pretty ideal comparison, in my opinion.
Yeah, but Kroft is not Kroft. He's
well, Eifert keeps getting injured, but Swain is more durable than Eifert.
Yeah, Pitt is a pretty good comparison. But what about the younger Gronkowski? I mean,
Gino Gronkowski.
They're pretty similar players.
They are. Gino was a fullback, went to tight end. That's a fair point. That's a valid argument.
Yeah. Yeah, they're pretty similar players. I mean, that would probably be, and I love Gino. I think Gino still has upside. And he's just, I mean, he's not his brother. I mean, let's face it, Gronk is alpha male in the NFL. Yeah, that's 3/4 of what Gronk is. I mean, he's not, Gronkowski is not athletic. He's not, he's not great at any one thing, but he can catch the ball, and when you see him, it's like, he's a big boy and he's a man's man.
Let me tell you something.
You find a way to make it happen.
And something you might say with Gronk is he's not great at any one thing. He's good at several things.
Yeah, he's not great at any one thing, but he's good at everything. So that's.
And if we force our trend with his body breaking down more and more, he may not play that much longer. Given his over the top self, it wouldn't surprise me if he makes his way down to Orlando after his playing days.
I thought of two more comps for Sweeney.
Yeah.
Cameron Brate, which is a little too excessive in my opinion, based on how much success he's had pushing O.J. Howard, and Jack Doyle, the Colts. I think Jack Doyle is another good one. Well, we got to move on to the next
Brate is an excellent tight end. I mean, I don't see the comparison. Brate is a guy. Brate is a starting caliber tight end, and he has started. He has done well.
And he's pushing O.J. Howard for that job the same way Rocky Balboa pushed out Apollo Creed for the best boxer in the fictional universe, but that's how.
Let's put it this way: Brate did a good job in his year as a starter, but O.J. Howard was just too good of a talent to pass up. I mean, Brate is a very good receiving tight end, and he's got a very big body. So,
but Tampa Bay gave him a 6-year extension.
Comparison.
Yeah, but even though they drafted Howard in the first round, Tampa Bay gave Brate a 6-year extension, so they basically have both of them locked up.
Yeah, because Brate is an excellent tight end. I mean, if you have two tight ends like that, it's like that is exactly what New England was trying to do with Gronkowski and Hernandez before Hernandez decided to go all gangster rap on everybody and fail at it miserably. It was just lock up these two great tight ends and build your receiving core around that versatility. You already have one big receiver, and you've got a quarterback with a great arm. Now, all they have to really do is shore up their offensive line. So, I mean, if you have two great tight ends, but you can do that, but I do not see him as a Brate. I mean, I see him more as a...
Brait would be like an 88 or an 89 on Madden. I have this guy in an 86 with Elias Max. So that's why I think Brait's too excessive. I can see why people would compare Sweeney to Brait, but Brait's too unrealistic of an expectation for Tommy Sweeney at this point.
I as somebody who's followed Brait and has really liked what he's done, I don't even see the comparison.
All right, we'll get to the next tight end on my rankings, who also is an 86 ranking. That's TJ Hawkinson out of Iowa. Yes, Iowa has 2 tight ends, and some people think Hawkinson could go ahead of Fant. Like, Hawkinson's a sophomore redshirt, but he beat out Noah Fant for the John Mackey Award. And he's the first sophomore redshirt to ever win the John Mackey Award. Very first sophomore redshirt to ever win the John Mackey Award. And Matt Waldman would not shut up about how good this guy is a blocker. Like, I saw one of his tapes. I was not impressed with the blocking, but Waldman kept talking about how he won with a variety of blocks. He blocked with more finesse and variety. He doesn't block with physicality like Sweeney, but he pivot blocks. He cut blocks. He slide blocks. And he blocks with so much variety that he blows your house down. Literally. Mike Mayock might have to call the cops to keep TJ Hawkinson away from his house. Like, that's just how much variety TJ Hawkinson blocks with. And the Raiders hired Mayock to block and filled out work from his commentary. So TJ Hawkinson, he can bail out a left tackle. He knows how to extend his arms and frame his hands, pack the right amount of potency with his punches, and he can bail out a left tackle. If you line him up as a third offensive tackle, this guy can bail out your left tackle or your right tackle. So, I mean, that's how good of a blocker this guy is. Now, you'd like to see him jump more. He only has 20 routes compared to Fant's 30, but I feel like since he's a sophomore redshirt and he's already got 20 routes, if he comes back to school next year, he hasn't made a decision yet. But if he goes back to school, he can take over where Fant left off, and he can make his case. If he has a strong year without Noah Fant and wins the John Mackey Award again, he could go back to school and be a first-round pick. But that's a risk. If he doesn't live up to the hype, his stock could fall even further if he struggles. But if he goes now, he could still be a top 5 tight end in this draft despite being a sophomore redshirt. But he could also be the first tight end in 2020. And Waldman compared him to Dennis Pitta, but I see more of Todd Heap with the ability to make plays after the catch. But either way, I gave him an 86 grade, and he's way more durable than both Dennis Pitta or Todd Heap. So if you want Hawkinson, he's there for the taking, and I have an 86 grade on him. So anything you'd like to add, guys, before we get to the tight end 5?
He is too young for me to really pay much attention to, unless he is somebody who just wows me first time I see him, like Baker Mayfield at Texas Tech. I mean, I'm probably not gonna watch him as a redshirt freshman.
He's a redshirt sophomore.
I mean, that's just... Well, he's a redshirt sophomore now, but...
He'll be a junior next year if he goes back, but he could declare this year.
He's a redshirt freshman. So...
He's the first sophomore redshirt to win the John Mackey Award, which goes to the top tight end in college football. But a lot of that could be attributed to Fant getting double teamed this year. You could definitely make that case.
Well, it could, but I mean, like, I'll probably watch a little more later. It's like right now I'm kind of intrigued because 3 of the top players I had at their positions in their draft years right now are in the playoffs, and 2 are quarterbacks leading teams. So I'm kind of excited about that.
Yeah.
I mean, Dak Prescott and Nick Foles. I mean, they're still there. Nick Foles wins. Hey, I look pretty good. I could take a year and enjoy it.
All right, tight end 5. There's a big. I've got an 86 grade on this player too, but Josh Oliver is a guy that I saw his Yahoo does this thing called the Senior Bowl show. And like every Wednesday at 4 p.m. on Yahoo Sports, you can get previews on the Senior Bowl. And I watched a clip of Josh Oliver for Yahoo Senior Bowl special. I was blown away by the clip. 56 receptions, 709 receiving yards, 4 receiving touchdowns, and he was double teamed and triple teamed constantly. And I honestly think this guy has the upside to develop into a future starter. Like, he reminds me of Antonio Gates coming out of Kent State. Like, I think Josh Oliver, he's got the ceiling to be a steal in the draft. He can run 30 different routes. He excels in the red zone. Can run every type of route. Soft hands, leaps in the air, makes spectacular one-handed catches, can catch in traffic. He can catch with variety, catches in the red zone. My weakness with Josh Oliver is his Army film tape. I watched the full game of San Jose State versus Army, where Josh Oliver only had 2 receptions for 19 receiving yards. His blocking in that game was disappointing, and the Senior Bowl did a hell of a job hyping up Josh Oliver, considering San Jose State surrendered 52 consecutive points to Army after taking a 3-0 lead on Army. To Josh Oliver's defense, both of San Jose State's quarterbacks got injured in that game, and their third stringer was special summoned into the starting lineup like Willie Beeman in any given Sunday, and the offensive line self-esteem imploded. Like, the offensive line didn't even want to block for the third-string quarterback. Like, the offensive line was that defeated. Like, the rest of the offense, except for Josh Oliver, had no self-esteem, and Oliver basically had to carry San Jose State in that game, despite the fact that they surrendered 52 consecutive points. Opportunities, 4th-round grade. Speed, route running size, athleticism. However, he does have the 2019 Senior Bowl. My threat with Josh Oliver is when you're down 28-3 to Army, like you take a 3-0 lead over Army and Army scores 4 consecutive touchdowns on you, and you're not pissed off and you're not lighting a fire under your teammates' rear ends, that makes me wonder how much self-esteem this prospect has, because it's like Army scored 52 unanswered on you. You're San Jose State. Like, if you've got a third-string QB and the offensive line's already giving up when you're down 28-3, the Patriots would not have won Super Bowl 51 if their offensive line gave up on them when they're down 28-3. Tom Brady just rallied back, but that's the point is you got to rally your teammates back. I do think he has the upside to be a starter, but he didn't showcase that attitude-wise. So he's got the talent, but he lacks the attitude. And you can argue that that's a concern to a degree.
You can argue that. I mean, at the same time, I look at it, you say self-esteem doesn't necessarily have to mean he has low self-esteem. It could just be his personality. So with me, just my personality, it's like one of my former department managers literally asked me one day when I walked through the door, like, why do you look so pissed off all the time? Look like you're going to kick somebody's ass. Like, no, this is just my face. I mean, it's like, so it may just be that you project something. It doesn't mean that it's actually what it is. But as we know, sometimes projections can give the wrong impression. So, I mean, in his case, had to wait for the interviews and see what happened.
Yep, and next up is Utah State, Dax Raymond, 6'5", 250. He had 7 receptions for 76 receiving yards against the Michigan State Spartans. And he's flexible enough to move to receiver. Like, they were lining him up as a field against Michigan State's field corner and boundary corner. So even though he's 6'5", 250 and he's a tight end, they actually lined him up as an outside receiver. So he's one of these plug-and-play tight ends that you can just like there's some tight ends that they end up converting to receiver. Dax Raymond might be that in this year's class. But my weakness with Dax Raymond is his motor. Like, his motor looked very slow and pedestrian versus Michigan State. And it turns out he's going to be in the Senior Bowl. But the threat is he does have some durability concerns. He only started all 12 games once as a sophomore redshirt. That may explain why his motor is pretty slow on tape, why his knees appear to be brittle at times. But I do think he has the potential to be a solid starter. I mean, Dax Raymond does have some admirable traits on tape. And he's one of these guys where, yeah, you've got Noah Fant as a top tight end, and then basically everyone in the 2 through 6 range is in the running to be that tight end. And there's another tight end I think I have an 86 grade on. That's tight end 7. But it's basically a crapshoot to see who's the number 2 tight end after Noah Fant. And you got a lot of guys that are very evenly matched. Not really a star or a Pro Bowl ceiling player like Noah Fant, but you got a lot of guys jockeying for those number 2 and number 3 spots, and it's really wide open. It comes down to who's going to step up in Mobile, who's going to step up the combine, who's not going to take their foot off the gas pedal. And Dax Raymond's another one of these guys that could be that player. Anything you'd like to add, Joey, before we get to the next player?
Let's keep going.
All right, well, and let's meet our final contestant on America's Got Talent at the tight end position, Caleb Wilson out of UCLA. Now, Caleb Wilson, 6'4", 235. He did surprisingly well without Josh Rosen in 2018, despite UCLA's 3-9 record. 60 receptions, 965 receiving yards, and 4 receiving touchdowns. And he had 8 receptions, 102 receiving yards, and 1 receiving touchdown versus Washington. He had a field day versus Taylor Rapp, even without Josh Rosen. That does say a lot. And Caleb Wilson was one of these guys that, had he declared as a sophomore redshirt, he was a guy that I remember reading about on Walter Football a year ago, and Charlie had him listed as like a mid to late first rounder. So that was with Rosen. And then he just does this without Josh Rosen and really steps up and becomes the leader of UCLA. And he can catch in the air. He can make signature plays. He can have 100-yard games. He also had 100-yard games versus Arizona State and Stanford as well. And he can run 30 different routes. I'm talking streaks, post stops, post routes, drags, shoots, out routes. Pretty much any route you can think of, he can come in and run that route, and he can catch without using his body. He generates separation with ease and is very difficult to tackle. But his weakness is he has trouble breaking tackles. He's probably the easiest tight end to tackle in the entire draft class. Plus, he only played 5 games in 2017. Most tight ends are 240 or 250. This guy's 235. And I remember reading one of the reports saying that his lack of size could be his undoing because he's only 235 compared to the other tight ends in this class. So he needs to put on some muscle. But overall, Caleb Wilson could be another one of these guys who's in the running with the rest of the tight ends not named Noah Fant to be tight end too. I mean, I'm intrigued.
Yeah, and once again, that's the one thing with potential that once you get it, I mean, question is, what are you going to do with it? And, so is he going to be the big potential number 2 receiver, or is he just going to be the next guy?
Yeah, and it's going to come down to what team these guys get drafted by. Like, let's say Tommy Sweeney goes to the Bengals in the 2nd or 3rd round, and Caleb Wilson falls to the Patriots in the 4th round. Caleb Wilson probably ends up having the better career in that scenario, given the fact that he's learning under Gronkowski and Brady, for that matter. Because you have to take scheme fit into account if you have this many tight ends this evenly matched with each other. When it comes down to that, and you have 6 different tight ends with the same exact potential grade, the scheme fit's going to matter. That's the variable.
Well, scheme fit matters
regardless of your potential grade. But
Yeah.
Especially when you have this many tight ends competing with each other and they have the exact same grade, and it's this close. You especially have to take scheme fit into account in that situation.
Well, it's a pretty unspectacular tight end class. I mean, you got solid. I mean, your best tight ends are debatable, and they're anything from.
I think it's deeper than 2018 because 2018, the only tight ends I liked until the Senior Bowl were Brenneman, who didn't even get to play in the NFL, and Fumagalli. And then Gesicki had a strong Senior Bowl week. I became a fan of Mark Andrews tape-wise, and the class got stronger. This class reminds me of 2017 in terms of depth, but it does not have the star power at the top of the group. O.J. Howard, Evan Ingram, David Njoku. That class had star power. And we were talking about O.J. Howard and Evan Ingram in October when we were saying both of them could be first rounders in October 2016 that year. And people thought, well, we were crazy, but we ended up being right because we were patient with the process.
Yeah. And
this class is not that top heavy. It's not top heavy like 2017, but I think it could be deeper than 2017. And now we're going to get to some SEC tight ends, and I love Kerm's input on these guys. If you want to break down the top 7 first, that's awesome, but we are going to get to an Alabama tight end. And
I don't have any. The only guy I really was looking at has been Irv Smith Jr.
And that's the guy we're going to mention next, which is perfect timing. I mean, 40 receptions, 667 receiving yards, and 7 receiving touchdowns. And he's got one more audition versus Clemson in tomorrow night's championship game. Now, strength, he had a strong game versus Arkansas team captain Santos Ramirez. He even scored in the very first play versus Arkansas. Just to emasculate Arkansas that much. He has ideal size. He's selfless. He plays with a lot of heart, flexible in terms of attitude, willing to block or catch if it helps Alabama win. Weaknesses, he drops passes on tape at time. He has a tendency to fumble. During his 2017 tape, the only game tape that I've seen with film cuts for Irv Smith Jr. is his 2017 tape versus Tennessee, and that's unacceptable. And you consider how many Alabama full games are on YouTube. All you got to do is go find one of those full games, condense it, and get the Irv Smith tape, and put it up on YouTube. That's all you got to do. And it's like nobody's doing that. So, and Irv Smith Jr. is the son of Irv Smith, former first-round receiver. I have a fifth-round grade on Irv Smith Jr., but I feel like he can still be a borderline starter, and I don't really see any threats. I think this is a high-floor guy. So I gave him an 85 grade. I don't think he's as polished as O.J. Howard. I don't think he has Howard's ceiling, but he took over for Howard, and he's done well. So it's like, you know what? Maybe he's got a shot.
Chris,
yes.
You impressed me. Without your knowledge, I would have never known that Irv Smith Jr. was the son of Irv Smith. I'm sure the Irv Smiths of the world will be glad that the person they named Jr. is named Irv Smith as well. Quite impressive deduction. Now, the question is, what gave it away? I mean, was it the junior at the end of the name?
Yeah, I'm going to do Irv Smith Jr., Emmett Smith Jr. comparison here. Just because Irv Smith more junior time than Emmett Smith Jr., and for good reason.
Well, I would rate Irv Smith higher than Irv Smith. I mean, you know, Irv Smith can only have so many grades. I mean, he's not multiple.
Okay, well, he was the number 22 tight end in high school, 3-star recruit. Emmett Smith Jr. I want to see what Emmitt Smith Jr.'s grade was really quickly. See who is Florida scholarship offer. And yes, he landed a Florida scholarship offer. Not sure where he's going, but he was 6A, an offensive newcomer of the year as a sophomore, and he's a 4-star recruit. So he's a 4-star recruit, and he's in the 2020 recruiting class. So Emmitt Smith Jr.'s kid, we're going to have to wait another year to find out where he goes because he'll be a senior next season in high school. So he's a high school junior this year, but he's got offers from Florida, Duke, Boston College, Arkansas, and Georgia. So we'll have to wait another year to find out what Emmitt Smith Jr.'s kid does. But for now, Irv Smith Jr.
He's going to the Bears.
So the Bears are going to commit recruiting violations and recruit him straight out of high school to complement Jordan Howard and Tariq Cohen. Fascinating.
No.
I wonder where they get all that money to recruit high school athletes.
I was saying, because I was going to the Cal Bears.
Oh, the California Golden Bears. They're the Golden Bears. The Golden Bears. The Golden Bears. They're the Golden Bears. They're not the Bears. They're the Golden Bears. Okay? And they're awesome, but they're the Golden Bears.
Thank God and make it good for this wonderful day. Go Bears.
We have to call them the Golden Bears because they're the Golden Bears, okay? I don't mind adding the Chicago Bears play on, but they're the Golden Bears. We don't want to start mixing up our audience by confusing the Bears with the Golden Bears because that'll piss off Bears fans. And we're not just going to troll Bears fans for our own entertainment. We're not that evil.
We've done enough trolling with the first 15 minutes of this podcast being a political discussion because you wasn't on and me and Joey had the before.
Chris, I mean, if Kerm and myself didn't troll people, I mean, how would we have fun? I mean, it would be so boring. So, yeah. 3/4 of a podcast, we sit here and troll you. We talk on Facebook during the podcast trolling you just because it's easy and it's fun.
That's true. I never put it into hindsight like that. But Irv Smith Jr.
Now, we do never troll Lisa because Lisa would kill us both.
Yeah, she would.
She would kill you. Well, she wouldn't kill you. She'd just shave your head.
Yeah, I've been hearing some rumblings that Lisa's purchasing an underground dungeon. I'm not sure what it's for, but I'm not going to comment on it because I don't want to get sent to the dungeon.
Just because she likes feasting on your tears.
Plus, if we make our audience wonder what the dungeon's purpose is, that creates intrigue. So, yes. We're transitioning from Irv Smith Jr. to a Lisa secret dungeon to Isaac Nauta out of Georgia. And Isaac Nauta had 30... No, wait. Let me rephrase that. Alabama to the Bears to Lisa's dungeon to Georgia. So that's really what happened.
Chris, it's a mix between Fight Club and Bear Bryant practices.
That's perfect. Fight Club and Bear Bryant's practices. But Isaac Nauta had strong games against Florida and Alabama, but he underperformed against everyone else. And he took Jeb Blazevich's job as a tight end right at the gate. Good route runner, 30 receptions, 430 yards, 3 touchdowns. He relies on his receptions when uncontested in zone coverage, but he struggles with man and press coverage. I have a 5th-round grade on Nauta, but I feel like he could have boosted his stock by going back to school. He's projected to run a 4.6 to 4.7 40 time with no all-star game to play in. That really worries me since Texas limited him to 1 reception for 3 receiving yards. He was able to take the starting tight end job from Jeb Blazevich, But that lack of speed is pretty alarming. I mean, he was able to get in Deontay Thompson's face in the SEC championship, but he had 1 reception for 3 yards against Texas. So, just wondering why there's a big drop off. Maybe a couple in Texas. I have a funny story about the Sugar Bowl. It's about my parents' honeymoon. Well, Jimmy Johnson, my mom and dad were hanging out in the Miami Hurricanes locker room with Jimmy Johnson. True story. My parents' honeymoon, they were hanging out with Miami, and my dad went to Tennessee. And this was the year Tennessee beat Miami in the Sugar Bowl. My mom fingered the Miami Hurricanes team cake during their honeymoon. So she jinxed the Hurricanes over her honeymoon. So for all of us here at Draft Utopia, we send our sincerest apologies to Jimmy Johnson. But hey, how about them Cowboys? Congrats on beating the Seahawks. My mom cost Jimmy Johnson a bowl win with her fingering the cake stunt.
Yes. I'm sorry. I'm trying to get the thought process of your parents on their honeymoon out of my head. So
yeah, but it's a cake. They're fingering a cake, and they're in the locker room of the Miami Hurricanes. Michael Irvin, Vinny Testaverde, and they're fingering a cake to ruin their bowl chances. I think that's hilarious. As long as we keep things professional and keep the ball rolling, it's completely okay. As long as we're open-minded and inclusive, like adults.
Of course, because that's the only reason Kerr and myself actually get along, is because we're both open-minded. Like, let's face it, I'm a Republican. Conservative. I'm progressive. Kerm's an Alabama fan. I'm an Ohio University fan. Kerm's a Cowboys fan. I'm a Browns fan. There is no way we should ever get along. We should be trying to plot reasons to kill each other. But we're open-minded. We're happy.
Yeah.
We sing to the forest. We sing to the forest together. We love the breeze. We love the wind. We both have pretty nice-looking beards. Yes. We're open-minded. And our similarities are perfect. Okay, enough of that DDP crap. Let's get back to football.
But Isaac, he's got ability, but he's boomer bust type player. But after Herb Smith Jr., you can start to see this drop off begin to take effect. And next up, Texas A&M, my final projected starter, Jace Sternberger. 48 receptions, 832 receiving yards, 10 receiving touchdowns. 1-year wonder, but his signature season prompted him to declare he can run different routes, 7 different routes, excellent blocker. He needs to improve as a route runner, but I've got a 5th-round grade on him, and he had some impressive games versus Kentucky, South Carolina, Ole Miss, UAB, and LSU. And 1 year of experience. He's only a 1-year starter, but he's got enough upside to be a borderline starter because he had 10 receiving touchdowns and really made a strong first impression. I mean, I had this guy at 14 on my rankings initially, but I went back and watched the tape. I was so impressed with him that I moved him up to number 10. So, yeah, Jace Sternberger. That's his name.
He may not press NFL scouts, but at least he impressed you.
Yeah, and he's got the most radical last name of any tight end in this class, Sternberger.
Yeah, it does sound like the name of an NFL agent.
Yes. And we'll go from Sternberger to Foster Moreau, LSU tight end, 6'6", 250. He only had 2 receiving touchdowns. He declined from 2017, but he excelled in the red zone. He can catch anything. He can run block or pass block, but he drops easy passes. Route running needs to improve. I've got a 6th-round grade on him, but he's got a Senior Bowl invite. And he's got an opportunity to clean things up in Mobile. So anything you'd like to say about Foster Moreau, or would you rather do a promo segment on Foster's Australian for beer?
That's literally where I was going with it. When you asked about the comments, it's like I haven't really paid much attention to the guys on Spectaculars. It's like Foster's American for pounding. And talk about Foster picked up by the Redskins. It's like, yeah, the name Foster isn't exactly loved in America at the moment. Unless you're at a bar and getting some Fosters and having a good time. And Foster's pretty well nicknamed name. But, yeah, he's on Spectacular. He's there. He's probably not going to get drafted. As you probably noticed,
I can't wait until the combine where a scout asks him if he had a home for imaginary friends growing up. That was a play on of the there was a show called Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. It was like a cartoon. I never watched it, but that was actually a thing back in the day. So I want to see a team panic and ask a really stupid question, because they always do this. Teams always ask really stupid questions during the combine.
There was a team that asked one player if their mother was a prostitute. Okay. That is, I mean, that's the thing. It's like they will ask.
They will. Anything about Foster Moreau before we get to our number 12 prospect, Coom? All right, so we go from Foster Moreau to Zach Gentry out of Michigan. 6'8", 262 tight end. He only had signature game versus Maryland, but he showed some flashes versus SMU. He beat out Tyrone Wheatley. He's got great route running. He can run 30 different routes, but he's more prone to dropping passes. He had 0 receptions versus Ohio State. He dropped 3 passes versus the Buckeyes. And this is a weak safety class. So the fact that Ohio State held new goose egg is a red flag. I have a 6th-round grade on him, but he probably should have went back to school with Shea Patterson. He really could have done some good stuff with Shea Patterson at Michigan. So, and this guy makes Jake Butt look like Chuck Norris. So that's not a knock on Butt, but more of a jab at Gentry. So I have a 79 potential grade on him. And at this point, there really isn't a starting tight end left in the class. So, Drew Sample out of Washington, I have a 7th-round grade on him. I mean, this guy was wide open on a bunch of plays, but Browning didn't get it to Sample. He didn't try to make something happen. He's a good blocker for Myles Gaskin, but he's inconsistent. He's projected around 4.8, 6.40 time, though. So, yeah. 7th-round pick, late-round pick. Then you got C.J. Conrad out of Kentucky. His best game came against Middle Tennessee State. 4 receptions, 51 receiving yards, 1 receiving touchdown. He's a good blocker for Benny Snell Jr., but he's inconsistent. You want to see him improve his route tree. Honestly, Conrad should get drafted if he finds a way to – like, he's one of these guys that could do well at the Shrine Game or the Collegiate Bowl. He did not make the Senior Bowl, but I'm guessing he'll either be at the Shrine Game or the Collegiate Bowl. And then finally, to wrap things up, we've got Mitchell Wilcox out of South Florida. He's dropped easy passes, terrible route running. Even though Wilcox dominated versus Illinois, he dropped a pass that led to an interception. So he gets punished and is the final tight end on our rankings as a result. And I have a 75 grade on him. But I think he's a 3rd-string tight end. But this class, after the first 10 tight ends, it takes its toll. And Joey will go even further and say after the first 7 or 8, it really begins to take its toll. I mean, any thoughts before we wrap up? amazing. We cleared through the top 15 in under an hour, even with Joey and Kern playing politics for the first 15 minutes. So I'm going to end the Google Hangout, but we'll stay on TalkShoe. So we'll talk some NFL on TalkShoe. So head over to TalkShoe if you're listening to this on Google Hangouts.